Okay, we got some breaking news from the NFL world today. So, former Indianapolis Colts head coach, former Eagles offensive coordinator Frank Reich has now been hired by the Carolina Panthers.
Somewhere along those lines. Happy
I like
Halloween!
I like those glasses, dude. They're
Tonight's
nice.
gonna be a thriller!
Have I told you I worked at the World Series? It was my first year at the stadium. I went to Fanatics Fest, I went to Comic Con, and I went to the World Series. It was my first year at the stadium, and the Yankees made it all the way to the World Series. Unfortunately, we lost 5 games to the Dodgers.
I said the Giants will be a perfect fit for John Harbaugh because you already established the quarterback situation, you already established the running back position, you already established the right receiver position, and you have the top 5 pick in the draft.
Todd Bowles, at best, is a mediocre coach. He did the same situation with the Jets back in 2015, ultimately maliciously ruining a power-hungry Baker Mayfield and potentially Mike Evans.
But Indianapolis ultimately came back, got the go-ahead touchdown. Then, at the end of the game, when Brady got the ball less than a minute, Peyton had his head down the entire time because he knew Brady had enough time. But the interception happened. It's funny. All of a sudden, Peyton Manning hears the crowd roaring. He finally looks up and starts jumping up and down real Fasten your seatbelts for the realest Eagles and Sixers YouTuber! One who plays no clickbait and gets to the point! The myth, the legend, Nicky Steves! Come to my channel, you know the deal. Yo, boy, always keeps things real. Activity statue, think, and slate, dropping unrealistic man. 2K takes for the clip. Even though cats like that get views closer to the millie, never hear me preach LeBron to Philly. Before you watch the Eagles all the way through to early 22, authentic talk, forget what others do. Come to my channel, you know the deal. Yo, boy, always keeps things real. The 24/7, 365 way. Sports content for the reals that fill the day. Good morning, folks. We are a few minutes shy of noon, but it's not going to hurt to start this bad boy just 2 minutes early. It is episode 53 of the 3-Point Blitz. It's the final day of March, and we're getting ready to turn the calendar over to April tomorrow. So that means we're getting a little bit closer to the NFL draft, which means come episode 54 next week will be the first mock draft on the 3-Point Blitz coming next week, folks. So stay tuned for that. But this week, we're one step closer to the final game. As of next Tuesday, episode 54, we'll recap the championship round for March Madness. But first, we got to get through the Final Four and then see the championship game played next Monday, April 6th, one day shy of episode 54. So we will talk about March Madness in this one, talk a little bit about the NBA. But first, we're going to do what we usually do, get the negative part out the way, and do the rant of the week. And if you've seen the thumbnail, I'm sure you already know what the rant of the week is going to be about. Now, we don't usually talk about this. I don't talk about this sport, but there is a certain person from this sport whose name is coming up in the news for all the wrong reasons. And that's former golf still some extent golf superstar Tiger Woods turned guy in the news for all the wrong reasons. It happened again, folks. It felt like Groundhog's Day over the weekend when we heard about Tiger Woods getting another car wreck, and this time driving under the influence. This time it's believed that he was under the influence, as Greg has said in the chat, of opioids. And yes, that is true. There is a big opioid addiction epidemic that's been going on throughout the country, and it's been in the news for years. So the fact that it was opioids makes this story hit harder, because that's a substance that's been a very addictive, and it's been an epidemic throughout the United States for years now, and a well-known one at that, which makes this scenario even worse. But also as a reminder, folks, that driving under the influence is not solely alcohol related. There is a difference between DUI, driving under the influence, which could be of alcohol, but possibly prescription drugs that affect judgment, or could even be marijuana, even though I personally don't have a problem with marijuana itself, but driving after smoking too much of it or eating too much of it in edibles can impair your driving negatively. It can cause negative crashes, as well as opioids, which Tiger Woods was on. And as far as that goes, man, it feels like deja vu all over again for Tiger Woods, because we know his history of car crashes, drinking and driving, or being under the influence of some substance while driving is well documented. This goes all the way back to 2009. It was the morning after Thanksgiving, early hours on Black Friday. He crashed his car, and it shortly found out that he was under the influence of alcohol. This came shortly after an argument with his wife, or his now ex-wife discovered that he had been having extramarital affairs. And that became a whole saga in the news throughout the holiday season into early 2010. And he lost a lot of sponsorships. But then years later, 2017, he got arrested on a DUI, which proved that alcoholism was still a problem in Tiger Woods' life, even years later. And then he did come back, win a Masters in 2019. He had the redemption story, but then in 2021, he got in another car crash. This time, he was lucky to even be alive after that car crash in early 2021. Believes he was on the way to meet with Drew Brees and Justin Herbert to play golf. And this was shortly after Herbert's rookie season, and then he ended up getting a crash, and that never happened. And then, he also had a few surgeries as a result. So there was that.
So at this point, this was 2 crashes, a DUI, and now just recently over the weekend, he crashed his car again in Florida, this time landing sideways. So another dangerous crash for Tiger Woods. And he struggled to stand up when he was pulled over by the police. And here's the link to the story if you guys want to check it out. So right there, you got the story, details of the story about Tiger Woods. And so this came out just about an hour ago. It's from ESPN. I'll be reading bits and pieces of it. The link's there if you guys want to follow along yourself. But unfortunately for Tiger Woods, man. So this was another DUI and another serious crash. Now, this is a problem, now this is a pattern A. But let's talk about the Tiger Woods details. So it came out about an hour ago said Martin County Sheriff John, we'll just call him John Budd, said Friday that Woods' breathalyzer test didn't show signs of alcohol. Woods refused to submit a urinal test for other drugs, and that's what ultimately led to him getting arrested on driving under the influence. And then Woods' Range Rover SUV rolled over after it clipped the trailer being hauled by a truck. The truck had slowed to turn into a driveway. Woods' SUV swerved and flipped on its side and slid down the road. Woods climbed out of the passenger window. He was able to get out, but then the Martin County Sheriff, according to the article, did observe several signs of impairment and requested to conduct a DUI investigation to ensure that Woods was able to operate the motor vehicle. This is when they knew signs that he was off, and it's believed that he did have opioids. And Woods is also claiming that he was on his phone, which we don't know if that's necessarily true. That's just a Tiger Woods said thing at the moment. But if that is true that he was at his phone, that's another sign of reckless decision-making. Why would you be looking at your phone while driving? That's literally one of the most dangerous things you could do, texting while driving or talking while driving, because it takes your focus away from the road, especially texting where a pedestrian could walk by. You could end up hitting a traffic light, or you could barge into road debris without even realizing it if you're not even paying attention while you're driving. It's one thing to be looking at your phone if you're in a passenger seat where you're not responsible for driving. But even then, along with being under the influence and also looking at your phone while driving, if this is true, another sign of irresponsible decision-making from Earl Tiger Woods. And I've said this before in a previous rant of the week on the 3-Point Blitz about professional athletes often getting passes for negligent behavior. This was after one of Zion's situations. There's another guy who seems to get in the news for a lot of the wrong reasons. Hopefully that's a trend that starts to change soon with Zion. But there was that pattern. I said in this, I pointed to both Zion and other professional athletes that had off the field, court, ice, ring issues that get passes over and over again. And it's the same thing with Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods has often gotten slaps on the wrist for this in terms of legal, where all he's gotten slap on the wrist after slap on the wrist. Now, he did have one incident that resulted in divorce back in 2010 from all the extramarital affairs he had, and he got taken to the cleaners in the divorce court for it. But in terms of legal issues for his DUIs and his reckless driving, he hasn't faced any true harsh penalties yet. And the fact that, but that's also part of the problem. A lot of these guys that are stars, they seem to get light punishments over and over and over again as a result of being a star, whether that be an athlete, an actor, an entertainer, TV show host, singer, rapper, whatever the case may be. A lot of these people who are celebrities, who are famous, they often seem to get slapped on the wrist legally compared to the average Joe. And that's part of the reason why these athletes or any other entertainer gets to skate by, and they continue to do wrong and continue to repeat their mistakes because they've never truly been held accountable for it. Now, Tiger Woods has faced problems due to his reckless behavior, such as back surgeries, which is also accumulation from his golf career too, but it's also from his surgeries. But he hasn't really faced any legal penalties, any true serious legal penalties that an average Joe would face for this type of behavior. And that's part of the reason he keeps repeating these same mistakes. Because in Tiger Woods' mind, hey, I'm Earl Tiger Woods. I'm a superstar. People recognize who I am. I have leadway to make mistakes and get the benefit of the doubt. He's never had any true hard life-altering consequences as a result. He's never lost a job and then had to live on the streets as a result, as an example of a life-altering consequence. So that's why a guy like a Tiger Woods continues to repeat and make the same mistakes over and over again. A guy from an entirely different sport I brought up, Gervonta Tank Davis, the boxer, has made the mistakes of spousal abuse, domestic abuse, assault and battery repeatedly, and because he continues to get legal slap on the wrist, minimal jail time or probation, he continues to repeat the same mistakes over and over again. And even Allen Iverson, look, as much as we love Allen Iverson, he's another example of a guy who got slapped on the wrist for his reckless decision making. And that's part of a bigger problem, not just in the Tiger Woods case, but in society as a whole. Particularly in the United States, where these stars continue to get slapped on the wrist compared to the average Joe, and they don't face any true hard life-altering consequences for their poor decision-making, and they repeat the same mistakes over and over and over again, like a Zion Williamson or a Ja Morant with their off-the-court issues in the NBA. And that does play a factor. I'm not solely blaming the legal system for it either, because these men and sometimes women, they ultimately make their own decisions. They're still responsible for their own actions as adults, and ultimately they choose to make poor decisions over and over again. However, a lot of times the legal system giving them lenient punishment does influence the same behavior to occur over and over again, such as the case of Earl Tiger Woods, who's never faced any true life-altering consequences. Now, as far as he goes, Mr. Woods should just stop getting behind the wheel of a car, period, just for his own sake. Because he's harmed himself physically more than he has anything else by doing this time and time and time again. This is now 2 driving under the influence arrests and 3 major crashes he's had in his lifetime. It's best for Tiger Woods he just stopped getting behind the wheel of the car, because obviously it's not working for him. And I understand with the opioids why Tiger Woods does it, because it is an addicting painkiller. And for a guy like Tiger Woods, who's had numerous back surgeries, you can see why he's turned to painkillers to help alleviate the pain. It's pretty obvious to me. But still, though, opioid is very addicting, very serious. Someone in his camp who actually cares about him should try to reach out and offer, someone who's knowledgeable in the medical field should offer an alternative to opioids that are non-addicting, that can help with his back pain from all the surgeries he's had. And secondly, someone just needs to get into his head and tell him, Tiger, you do not need to get behind the wheel of a car in your life again. You can afford public transportation. You can afford Ubers and Lyfts. You're a superstar. You'll get respected treatment from them when people know who you are. It's best for your own sake that you stop getting behind the wheel of the car. You've had several major crashes. You're lucky you're still alive. Just do yourself a favor ultimately and stop driving. Now, I know for a guy like Tiger Woods, a superstar who's taken pride in having fancy cars, it's hard for him to take a step back, but he's got it for his own sake now. Especially because he cannot drive safely. It's obvious. Okay, maybe one time a car crash happens. Maybe it's a combination of factors that play a role. But when it's happening over and over, you got to look at the common denominator, and that's that Earl Tiger Woods is behind the car. It's just like, man, do yourself a favor. Stop driving for your own sake. And that would be it for the rant of the week. But unfortunately, in the NBA world, a former Detroit Pistons player decided to be an idiot and decided to say something that got him cut from his NBA, from his contract with Chicago Bulls. Jaden Ivey, the former. So let's talk about that for a minute before we move on. So let me just make sure. I got to get the banner ready. So we're going to talk about that. Yes, I know this seems like just a rant podcast, but Jaden Ivey got cut by the Chicago Bulls because he decided to go on Instagram Live and make controversial remarks about the LGBTQ community, the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender community, and push a lot of dated religious beliefs about that community, which are bigoted and discriminatory toward them. It's just like this, speaking of stupid decision making. Now, look, Jaden Ivey is a religious man. I get that. That's your right. You have the right to be Christian, Muslim, Catholic, Buddhist, Judaist, or possible or atheist, or whatever the case may be. That's your right to do so. But let's be honest, a lot of the anti-alternative lifestyle talk that comes out of that, this is dated from books that were written centuries ago. I'm pretty sure if these guys were real and they were still alive now, there's a good possibility they would change some of their beliefs from when those books were written. So let's get out the way before people defend it, saying it's what the Bible says. You got to remember, this was written centuries ago. There are aspects of it that hold up now, but I'm sure there are aspects that are dated, being how long ago these books were written. And to sit there and use that quote, a lot of crap from centuries old books, as an excuse to discriminate against an entire group of people, it's just so ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous because everybody, I'm sure, has at least met somebody or has a family member or a neighbor or a boss or a coworker or a classmate from school that they respected that's either gay, lesbian, bisexual, or possibly transgender. Everyone knows someone that fits on that spectrum that falls into that group. At least a couple people. Everyone at least has a family member or person they respect who fits in the group. So it's really stupid to discriminate against people just because they live an alternative lifestyle. Alternative lifestyle, it's the same thing as it is any other group of people. If you meet someone that lives an alternative lifestyle, that's a pleasant, respectful person that does good for the world, they should be praised and treated as such. But if somebody's a jerk, then they're a jerk, period. End of story. It's got nothing to do alone with your lifestyle. And for Jaden Ivey to say this is so ridiculous, especially for a guy, mind you, who's not a superstar. Part of the reason Jaden Ivey ultimately got cut is because he's not a superstar. He's a mid-tier player that another team, you can just find a replacement for a mid-tier tip player within the span of a couple days or an offseason real easily. Especially for a team like the Chicago Bulls, who in the basketball world are complete full-blown tank mode by now. They got nothing going for this season, and their short-term future, they got nothing going. So they're not going to tolerate Jaden Ivey pushing out those controversial point of views, especially when the NBA openly celebrates Pride Month in June. The same NBA that openly embraced Jason Collins when he came out of the closet as LGBT, was the first openly gay NBA player. Why would the NBA, who stood by Jason Collins and stands by Pride Month, tolerate this type of conduct from a mid-tier player who's easily replaceable? And Sir Jaden Ivey to throw shade at that community is so stupid. I don't care what. Look, you have the right to believe what you want to believe religiously, but you got to remember these Bibles are centuries old. I'm sure updated versions would have different beliefs from the original versions. So it's ridiculous. It's just an example of someone being stupid, being caught up in their own view of the world, not being able to see the world outside of their perspective. And ultimately, Jaden Ivey exposed himself and made a fool of himself. And because he's a mid-tier player, guess what? They're not going to tolerate those type of controversial views. Now, if you're a sports star, like another person who got caught making anti-LGBT comments, and Manny Pacquiao years ago, he kind of got a pass because he was a big superstar in the boxing world. But for Jaden Ivey in basketball, who's just a mid-tier player, nah, they don't want that. They're just going to scrap him, move on, find someone else, especially a team like the Bulls that has no playoff aspirations. Jaden Ivey is not an asset. He's just a liability to fill a spot on the roster. They're like, yeah, goodbye, see ya. We can always find another center to replace you. And this might be another Myers Leonard situation where he was just an average at best player who they say, nah, we're not going to tolerate these type of bigoted views. And ultimately, he's probably never going to get it. He might not get another NBA spot ever again, similar to Myers Leonard when he got caught making those anti-Semitic comments on that live stream back in, was it 2021, I believe it was. He never got another role in an NBA team again when he got cut by the Miami Heat for those remarks. Or was it the Heat or was it the Trailblazers? It was either the Heat or the Trailblazers when he made that anti-Semitic remark on a live stream, ultimately lost his job and his NBA career. Now, Jaden Ivey's lost his job. He might lose his NBA career as well. So I'll just leave. So we'll leave it at that. But before we do move on into the main subject, talking about March Madness in the NBA, quick acknowledgement to a Minnesota Vikings franchise legend. Vikings legend safety Joey Browner passed away yesterday at the age of 65. For those of you that played NFL Street 2, you might remember Browner being a character on the Gridiron Legends team of NFL Street 2 alongside fellow Vikings teammate Chris Carter. And so we did lose Joey Browner, who's actually a forgotten name. And now that I look into his history, here's a guy who I believe should be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, but unfortunately hasn't done so yet because throughout Browner's career, he's led the Vikings in 9 defensive categories throughout his career. He also holds the NFL Pro Bowl record with 3 crumbles returned for a touchdown throughout his history playing in the Pro Bowl. Mind you, this was back when it was in Hawaii and there was cash on the line. Players actually played. Throughout his career, he had a combined 40 interceptions, 505 total tackles, including playoff games. And Browner, during his pro career, was named to 6 Pro Bowls consecutively from 85 through the 1990 season and made the 1980s All-Madden team. So to me, that's a Hall of Fame resume. Maybe not a first ballot Hall of Famer, but a guy who should be in the Hall of Fame, a guy who had been retired for years, who I'm surprised hasn't been inducted yet. I mean, think about it. They've inducted Devin Hester, who, if you compare Devin Hester as a kick returner to Joey Browner as a secondary player, respectively, Browner had the better all-around career than Devin Hester. Now, I understand, look, Devin Hester was exciting to watch. He was an exciting return specialist. But are you really going to say that Devin Hester as a return specialist was truly better than Joey Browner? To me, no, because you look into his career, to me, here's a guy who should have already been in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, but sadly isn't. Because he was a key contributor for those Vikings teams in the late 80s. And remember the year they made a conference championship game against Washington? You had the infamous drop pass, which played a role in Doug Williams. And the one out Washington Commanders playing in the Super Bowl against the Broncos. Not to take away from Browner, but Joey Browner was a key contributor to those Vikings teams. And that was early. This was before the Herschel Walker trade when the Vikings thought they were just one running back away from him. Joey Browner was one of the lead guys on the defense during those years of the Minnesota Vikings franchise, where it seemed like they were one running back away and they made the move for Herschel Walker. But Joey Browner was a significant staple of those Minnesota Vikings defenses. Like I said, he led in most takeaways for touchdowns in Pro Bowl history, rode to 6 straight Pro Bowls, All-Madden team in the 80s, playing in the NFC, where from the second half of the 80s to the late 90s, NFC was the far superior conference. You had a loaded NFC throughout that time period, consisting of teams like Washington, the Giants, eventually into the 90s, the Cowboys, Packers, Eagles. Even though they didn't win a Super Bowl in that stretch, they were usually in the mix throughout that entire stretch where the NFC dominated the football world. And Joey Browner was one of the best defensive players in that late 80s portion when the NFC was the far superior conference, when the 49ers ultimately ran the show by winning the most championships in that era. So to me, it is a shame that Joey Browner didn't get put into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Now, maybe the good news, the one good thing about it is now with his passing, more people are going to look into his career and think to themselves, wait a minute, here's a guy that should be a Pro Football Hall of Famer. Why hasn't Joey Browner gotten inducted yet? So maybe this might eventually open the door for him to get more consideration from Hall of Fame voters and maybe get in the class of 2027. But to me, it's a bit of a shame that he hasn't gotten inducted yet, because He's a very underrated name amongst all-time guys. Now, I get safety. The lead safety of that era was Ronnie Lott from the San Francisco 49ers, and he was a key contributor to that dynasty. But Joey Browner is pretty close, too, and pretty underrated name in my books. And he was inducted into the Vikings Team Ring of Honor in 2009. And here's a few other fun facts about Joey Browner. Browner, he attended Western Reserve High in Warren, Ohio for a few years, but then his junior and senior years, family moved to Atlanta where he attended Southwest High. And he was an all-state defensive lineman as a junior and played basketball with future NBA forward Gerald Wilkins, and he also was a track and field player. So he was a star athlete from his younger years. He ultimately made it to the NFL and had a hell of a career. So rest in peace, Joey Browner. I'm sorry you didn't get to live to see a Hall of Fame induction in Canton, and hopefully one day you get that honor, because that's a lesson we should learn here. If there's these guys that we feel are worthy of being inducted, induct them while they're still here. Because we were just 1 year away from ultimately missing out on seeing Steve Mongo McMichael from that 85 Bears team not get inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. But fortunately, Mongo did get inducted before his passing, and he got to see his bust. Unfortunately, Joey Browner didn't get to live long enough to see his bust in Canton's, but hopefully he will get inducted one day. So rest in peace to Joey Browner, one of the underrated, great defensive players in NFL history, who, like I said, was also in NFL Street 2, which is how I first found out about him. Which, by the way, I know off subject, but that was an awesome game. But I didn't know, man. So rest in peace to the late Joey Browner, one of the best to do it at his position, one of the more underrated and underappreciated players in NFL history now that we looked at his resume. But hopefully now, with people learning more about Joey Browner, this will help people appreciate his greatness as a player more. So we'll leave it at that. And I'm going to take a quick break before we dive into some basketball. So we're going to start off. We'll talk a little bit about the NBA, the week that passed by, some of the best players of the week, and then we'll dive into March Madness. So stay tuned, folks. Your boy will be right back. All right, folks. Your boy's back. And now we're going to dive on to the main subject of this one, that being basketball. Between the NBA and March Madness, we got some stuff to talk about. So, with that, obviously, we did rant about Jaden Ivey's stupidity on IG earlier, but that part's out of the way. Now we're going to talk about now we're going to talk about the actual league itself. We'll start talking about the NBA, then we'll close it out talking a little bit about March Madness. So without any further ado, let's dive into it. We're going to start this thing off. We're going to talk about the NBA Players of the Week. They already came in. It was, just 1 second, folks. I'm going to share the graphic with you guys so you can see it for yourself. So, the NBA Players of the Week for the final week of March are, you see it, folks, Nikola Jokic for the Denver Nuggets and Jason Tatum from the Eastern Conference Boston Celtics were voted the players of the week. So now let's talk about it a little bit. So out west, Nikola Jokic, as you see, averaging 26 points, 17 rebounds, 14 points throughout the week. Nuggets were 4-0 for the week, so he was averaging triple doubles all throughout the week. So certainly a deserved player of the week when you see that not only was he averaging triple double for the week, the team won all 4 of their games throughout the week, and now they're 4-0, which at this point in the season, wins and losses are key, especially out west, where we see teams switch seeding standings from week to week. We've been on here over the course of the month of March, looking at the NBA standings, and we've seen a lot of changes from week to week out west. So for the Denver Nuggets to have Nikola Jokic averaging triple-double for the week and winning all 4 games, that's huge momentum-wise as we get closer to the playoffs, with tomorrow being the first day of April. Definitely a well-deserved nod over there. In the Eastern Conference, we had Jason Tatum averaging around the 26 points, around the 10 rebounds, and around the 7 assists per game, which isn't as impressive statistically, but it was good enough to help lead the Celtics to win all 3 of their games for the week. Now, between the two, Tatum one is maybe a little bit iffy, but Eastern Conference has always fluctuated. I feel like in part that's because there's only really a handful of really good teams in the East, and players don't really, and for the good teams that you do have, like the Pistons, Knicks, and Celtics, who are the top threats out there, they're 3 teams that play well together because they have a lot of depth on their roster, and that's why you don't really get like one player truly dominating a week, where you got like the Nuggets. Nikola Jokic is the guy that truly dominates. The Lakers, throughout the season, it's been Luka that's truly dominated. You'll still get some flashes of brilliance from LeBron, but not as consistently as you have throughout his career. You'll see with the Thunder, it's usually SGA dominating. Like those teams like the Celtics and Knicks, they got star players. Brunson's the star of the Knicks, but you also have other players that can deliver too, such as Karl Anthony Towns can still give you some 20-point games or still give you some triple doubles from time to time. You even got other guys like Mikal Bridges could every once in a while have a really good night. So the Knicks are full of guys, even a Josh Hart could occasionally have a really good game. Whereas the Knicks with Brunson, while he's the star of the team, sometimes you get those other players that can have really good games as well. It's not always going to be Brunson. For the Celtics, you got a lot of guys. Before Tatum returned, it was mostly Jaylen Brown, but you also had guys like Derek White and Peyton Pritchard who stepped up their game that could occasionally be the guy to lead the way. Now with Tatum being back with Boston, you don't really have one guy that truly dominates statistically, which is why the Eastern Conference fluctuates its players of the week. And you don't but at the same time, that's really good from a team standpoint for teams like the Celtics. And I know I'm getting kind of off subject with the players itself, but this ties into the point of why you see Eastern Conference. Like one week it could be LaMelo, next week it could be Tatum, few weeks before that it was, say, Bam, or a week before that it could have been Donovan Mitchell. Out west, you've had a lot. Out west, it's usually mostly teams full of like that players that dominate. But to be fair, most of the star players, like the ones that dominate, are out west, like SGA, Wemby, Nikola Jokic, Luka. Most of those guys play for teams out west. In the East, you got your stars too, like your Brunsons, Tatum, former Finals MVP, Jaylen Brown, who's been a really good number 2, and this year has really stepped up as the number 1 when Tatum was absent. You still got guys like Maxey and Embiid, but like Maxey who steps up, but with even as much as I love Maxey as a Sixers fan, he's not a top 5 player, maybe top 10, but maybe also an 11 or 12 at the moment. But the Sixers are never hot enough as a team for Maxey to really get credit as a player of the week. It's also partly based on who has the best stats for the best teams of the week, too. And that's the thing. A team like the Sixers are hot and cold, or same thing with the Hornets, why LaMelo or Con Knuppel doesn't get as many player of the week nods, because their teams are usually hot and cold and win-loss record. But teams like The Celtics, the Knicks, they're usually hot win-loss records, so their guys are more likely to get credit for player of the week. But that ties into the next part. Let's talk about the team aspect itself now. Who's hot and who's cold? So we're going to take a look at the standings real quickly. We got the full playoff picture up right here. So here we go. This is the playoff picture as of today, March 31st, before the games are played. You got, as of now, you got respectively, starting with the East, you got the Pistons 1 seed, Celtics 2, Knicks 3, Cavs 4, Raptors 5, Hawks 6, who've continued their dominating ways. Sixers went from 9 to 7 with the Heat and Magic's cold streaks, although the Miami Heat did beat the Sixers last night. And you had Magic are the 8 seed, Heat are the 9 seed, which I find that a bit odd. You would think it would be the Heat as the 8, Magic at the 9 if you look at the win record. 40 wins for the Heat, 39 for the Magic. Kind of odd that the Magic are 8 over the Heat. Now, I get that, the Heat have lost one more game to the Magic for the season, but it's not really good. It's kind of odd at the moment, but to be fair, though, it's not the end of the season yet. But the Heat did get a win over the Sixers, which means 1 or 2 more wins for Miami after their bad luck over the last week or so. Now they could be back in the playing game for the 7th seed. Sixers could fall back to the 9 or 10th seed. So that could still fluctuate at any minute. But on to the West, standing-wise, you got the Thunder, of course, and Spurs, predictably still 1 and 2. Lakers are still the 3 seed, but with the Nuggets' awesome week from Nikola Jokic and the 4 wins, they're only 1 game behind the Lakers. That could easily change at any point. And you got the T-Wolves 5, which, if I'm in the West, I would not want the Timberwolves in the opening round. I would rather either get the 7th or 8th seed through the play-in, or maybe the Rockets, because the Rockets, we don't know what they can really do come playoff time yet. But, and you're right, Orlando, oh yeah. I'll put it this way. The Orlando Magic currently are like the Sacramento Kings of the Eastern Conference, where we thought the Kings would actually be a solid team with Domantas Sabonis. They had that long drought without making the playoffs. They finally made it in 2023, and we thought the Kings were at least going to be back in contention out west, but that didn't pan out. Now the Kings are a dumpster fire again. The Magic, to me, are drawing parallels to what the Sacramento Kings were a few years ago, where they thought they had the potential to call back into contention, but they never did. And I'm starting to actually see those parallels with the Magic, a team that we all thought would probably be a playoff team, at least in the top 6 on paper. Paolo Banchero, Franz Wagner, but we know these guys struggle to stay healthy. You also got Desmond Bane from the Grizzlies, which that turned out to be a mistake because you gave up some of your depth pieces to get him being a Desmond Bane who was at best a role player. You had to give up a few pieces to get a guy who was on a similar tier to the guys you gave up to the Grizzlies. And now it's made your team worse off in the long term, not to mention Franz Wagner, who when healthy is a good player, but there is the injury concerns with him which hinders his availability. And I always said the strongest asset a player can have is availability. Ultimately, that's why the Chicago Bulls disappointed in the D Rose era, because once the injury started happening, he wasn't available to help the team. The same problem that Zion's had with the Pelicans and Ja Morant in recent years. He's been unavailable due to a combination of injuries and off the court issues. And now you see out west, the Grizzlies are nowhere in this picture. And same with the Pelicans. But back to the West, you have T-Wolves 5, which I would not like to have that opening round matchup against the T-Wolves, because we know behind Ant-Man, the T-Wolves could get an upset series or two, especially in the early portion of the playoffs. Then you get the Rockets 6, which I don't know. I mean, the Rockets, I'd prefer the Rockets at the moment seem like the safer matchup, because last year we saw they struggled even as the 2 seed against the Warriors when Jimmy Butler was healthy and they made that run. They got the win in the opening round. But then you get to the play-in spot. You get the Suns at 7, Clippers at 8, who've actually gotten better since they shipped off some of their old players. And now they actually got, kind of surprising, they shipped off a lot of players, and they're actually in playoff contention with the crew they have, which I got to respect. Then you got the Trailblazers and Warriors 9 and 10. Winner of that would play the loser of the 7-8 for the 8th seed. Which at this point, I mean, the Trailblazers, all right, they're doing an okay job rebuilding. They got an okay team for a team that doesn't really have a superstar player. You know, they've got a breakout star this year. And the Warriors, man, I think it's time to blow it up and get young again. Yes, they had a great run, 4 championship wins, 6 finals appearances during the Steph era. You had the Splash Brothers, one of the best backcourts in NBA history. You had Draymond Green, who was a good number 3 guy with that crew. You had Kevin Durant for a few years, which really put the Warriors on the map. But I feel like now it's come to an end. Yeah, Jimmy Butler suffered a season-ending injury, and we know he's not getting any younger. So his window to win a ring may have finally closed on him. And Steph Curry, while he can still deliver, he can still shoot the rock, it's not the same impact that it had a decade ago. So I feel like for the Warriors, it's time to start getting younger. Maybe you keep Curry around for the rebuild so he can be a mentor to the young players and can still help sell tickets to the home games. But I think for the Warriors, it's just time to move on with them. But as you see by the standings here, now it's time to talk who's hot and who's cold. I mean, I'm automatically disqualifying the Thunder and Spurs from the conversation because they've been hot throughout the season. And in the East, I'm disqualifying the Pistons and Celtics from this conversation because they've been consistent. And same for cold. I'm disqualifying teams like the Pelicans, or not the Pelicans, teams like the Nets and the Kings from the who's cold category. But let's start with who's cold, get that out the way. Obviously, the Orlando Magic have been a huge disappointment this season, as Arku said earlier. This is a team who, I'm trying to get the standings up where I can actually take a look at their win-loss records. All right. Oh, come on. What do we do? All right. Give me a second. Maybe we'll have to do it this way. It'll have to come up through Google search. There we go. So here we go. We got the standings. Now we can take a look at where they stand currently. As you see, the Orlando Magic, what a tumultuous season. To Arku's point, they're 3-7 in their last 10, and they've lost on a losing streak. They still got a winning record, but that's mainly off the backs of what they did earlier in the season. Now that it's gotten closer to clutch time, they've fallen apart, and they've gone from controlling their own destiny, being in the top 6, to now having to make it through the play-in tournament just to get a playoff spot. And likely, if they do, a first-round elimination. So, obviously, they're on the cold side. And this could likely be a case similar to the Miami Heat, who did make it as the 8th seed last year, where they get destroyed in the opening round. Stay locked in on fantasy basketball. I'm rooting for you. Yep. We got a little fantasy league going in the Hardcore Sports Network. I'm playing Randy this week with everything on the table. And then Nick's also pointing to the Lakers, and we're definitely going to talk about the Lakers in just a minute, talk about how they've been doing really good, because Luke Kennard, he's been a great addition for them, a great 6-man and a contender for 6-man of the year, most certainly, which is the exact opposite of the Orlando Magic. And then another team, obviously, the Miami Heat, man. It's a shame because just a few weeks ago, Bam had a historic night. Everyone's praising him, but I think it looks like Bam Adebayo sold his soul for history, because the Miami Heat as a team have not been performing up to standard since. Now they've lost 7 of their last 10. They did beat the Sixers last night, but going from controlling their own destiny to being the 9th seed as a team is not good and is terrible momentum-wise. So obviously they're cold for that reason right there. But who's hot? the Cleveland Cavaliers, they've been playing really good since the Harden acquisition. They're on a 2-game winning streak, and they're the number 4 seed, which going against the Raptors for an opening round matchup, I could see parallels to the Orlando Magic matchup from 2 seasons ago in the opening round where they won in 7 games. But really, that could be a toss-up then if that's the case between them and the Raptors. At this point, it looks like an easy win for the Cavs in that series because they're the hotter team record-wise. But a series between the Cavs and Raptors, if that plays out, that could be really good. But worse, it could be even worse because the Hawks, you look at it, look right here, you got 43, 33, 42, 32. The Raptors are only ahead because they have 1 less loss at the moment. That could easily change. Hawks could move up and become the number 5 seed. Cavs could be stuck playing the Hawks in the opening round. That could be, I think that would end up being a win for the Atlanta Hawks because they're the other hot team out there. They're just, the Hawks are on fire. Jalen Johnson's the real star of that team now. It's kind of like when the T-Wolves went from Cat to Ant-Man and realized, hey, Anthony Edwards is the star. Now, speaking of teams out west, we're talking about hot. You got the Los Angeles Lakers, of course. They've been absolutely on fire these last couple weeks. Luka Doncic's put up a strong case to be an MVP contender. Now, I still believe SGA is going to get the award because he's been more consistently dominant throughout the entire regular season. But Luka's been really good, too. He's been working that Luka magic. And to what Nick said, Luke Kennard's been phenomenal for them and a contender for 6th man of the year. So it's not just Luka Doncic. It's also Luke Kennard, too. Now I'm going to take a look at some of the Lakers stats real quick as a team. You still got Luka's leading the way. You still got DeAndre Ayton doing the dirty work, rebounding. And he's been a pretty good center for them, too. But as well, you've got Austin Reeves through his 49 games has averaged 23 points as well. And you still got DeAndre gets you them 12 as well. So they've been really good. But Kennard, in his 21 minutes played, he's been averaging close to 9 points per game. But when he does step in, he still gets you those valuable points off the bench and makes the most of his time, which makes him a valuable 6th man. He's never going to be he's not the guy you want as a long-term starter, but when he does come in, he can make an impact. Even Marcus Smart at this point in his career, he's still a decent role player for the minutes he gets. He can still get you close to 10 points per game when he does play. But this is the important part of the Lakers. They have depth. We even got Dalton Connect, who on an average of 10 minutes can still get you 4 points and still get you a rebound, which at least is valuable for the time he plays coming off the bench. Which, I'm sorry, Brawny, but yeah, there are plenty. Yeah, they got a lot of depth on the bench. You just enjoy sitting down, relaxing alongside Pop because, I'm sorry, they got guys off the bench that are helping out. There, Brawny, you got. And don't forget starters, of course, Austin Reeves, AR-15, who's been really lightening up and has been a really good addition. So, but the point of sharing this graphic with you guys is the Lakers got guys that are coming in off the bench, and that's played a key role along with Luka and them being the number 3 seed, and as well as LeBron even to some extent. When he plays, he still has those nights in those moments where he flashes greatness. He may not be the same guy he was in his prime, but you still get those flashes of greatness from LeBron here and there. And if LeBron's active come playoff time and Luka's on his game and LeBron brings his game for the playoffs, Lakers could be a threat out west. Now, obviously, the road to the finals still goes through the Thunder. I believe the Spurs are the runner-up, but don't underestimate the Lakers' chances because you see through their stats, they're playing really good as a team with the right combination of starters and role players. So don't underestimate the Lakers' chances come playoff time because they could really make some noise as well. So I got them as a hot team out west. And then also, as far as other hot teams out west goes, obviously the Denver Nuggets, like I said, Nikola Jokic was the player of the week last week, and he's been He had a triple-double average for the entire week on that 4-0 week last week. So the Denver Nuggets, and remember, they're only one game behind the Lakers, so you're talking about possibly the Denver Nuggets could end up being the number 3 seed possibly before the season's over. I want to see the schedule and see, is there any Lakers-Nuggets matchups coming up that could ultimately be the deciding factor? We're going to scroll down through this, skip ahead. So they've had that. No, there's no Lakers-Thunder, not Lakers-Thunder. There's no Lakers-Nuggets matchups left for the season. But the Nuggets, you got the Jazz, then you got the Spurs, Blazers, Grizzlies, Thunder, and Spurs. You got out of the 6 remaining matchups, on paper, 3 easy schedule games, 3 hard games on paper for the Nuggets. Let's see what the Lakers schedule is, because that could be a real deciding factor between who gets the 3 seed and the 4 seed, since they're only a game apart from each other out west. So you got the Nuggets on paper, 3 easy, 3 hard on paper, game-wise. And you got, on paper, it looks like on paper the Lakers got the tougher schedule. You got the Cavs tonight, the Thunder twice. You got the Phoenix Suns, who are still a better team than some expect. I still think the Lakers, if they start their guys, can win that game, but the Suns aren't. It's not an automatic win because the Suns are better than expected. And then you got the Mavs. That would just be Luka's day to remind the Mavericks why Nico Harrison trading him was a huge mistake if he plays. The Warriors, that should be a win because the Warriors just aren't the same team anymore. I mean, there might be nights where Steph Curry still plays great. They might have, but the Warriors have been cold as far as hot and cold teams in the West over the past month or so. Ever since Jimmy Butler got hurt, they've taken a lot of L's. And that goes to show you that when Butler was on the court for the Warriors, he was a difference maker. Remember when they got him? Remember the Warriors were completely out of the playoff picture completely around the trade deadline last year. They got Jimmy Butler. He meshed well with Curry and Draymond, and they started winning games. They got the number 7 seed through the play-in, and they won in the opening round against the Rockets. But this year, without Jimmy Butler at the important time of year, yes, they've gotten a play-in spot, but that's only because you got the Grizzlies, Pelicans, Mavs, Jazz, and Kings are complete dumpster fires. So by default, look, the Blazers and Warriors made the play-in tournament, but the Warriors are cold, and they've been that way for a month. But you got the Denver Nuggets are heating up. Even the Trailblazers heating up too, because they've won 7 of their last 10, and they're not too far away from the number 8 seed if they win more games. But there's another team that's hot, the Clippers. Once they got rid of some of their veterans, they let guys like Harden go. Now all of a sudden the Clippers are playing better now. They got a bunch of younger players. Let's take a look at the Clippers roster real quick. Who's leading? You got Kawhi Leonard, when he plays, is still leading the way. And the Stars referring to guys who got shipped off. But then you got John Collins, who is currently there, still solid. D. Jones is still solid. Kawhi, when he does play, he shows that he can still be a difference maker when healthy. And you got Brook Lopez. When he does play, he's still a solid guy coming off the bench. Can still get you about 8 points. So he can still get you some points off the bench. But the Clippers have been mainly riding off the backs of Kawhi when he's healthy. Even to John Collins, who's actually been pretty solid for them so far. So the Clippers, they're not the best team in the NBA, but they can still get it done. They can still win some games. And they could potentially get the 7th or 8th seed. So the Clippers might make a playoff run. And now, do I see them coming anywhere near the finals? No, I'm not even going to pretend that they could make a Cinderella run. I'm not even going to pretend. But those are only the teams who are hot and cold. Now, but before we switch gears to March Madness, real quickly, going to do some quick predictions for tonight's NBA games. And then we'll move on to talk about March Madness, Final Four. and get the hype going for the finals. So for tonight's games, we got, here we go. We got Phoenix, Orlando. It's in Orlando, but I'll take the Suns because Magic are just doo-doo at this point. Hornets playing the Nets in Brooklyn. Give me the Hornets to win that game. Pistons and Raptors. I'm going to go with the Raptors in that one, an upset. Knicks and Rockets. Give me the Knicks. Mavs and Bucks. Hey, if Cooper Flag's playing, give me the Mavs to win that game. And you got the Cavs and Lakers in LA. I'll take the Lakers to win that one. Clippers and Blazers in LA. I'm actually going to take the Blazers to get the win that one, even though the Clippers are the favorites. And that's a big game, too, because we just pointed out that the Trailblazers at 9, Clippers at 8, they're only separated by a game. This game could possibly be the deciding factor in playing seeding and determining the schedule up for the 2 playing games out west. If the Blazers win this game, there is a chance that this could be the deciding factor if the Blazers go from the 9th to the 8th seed. So there is potentially the play-in tournament seeding could potentially be on the line in this one. It could. That game alone obviously won't be the deciding factor, but this could be a deciding factor in the play-in bracket out west. So that's going to be more interesting than initially expected for its potential impact on the play-in tournament. But I'll take the Blazers actually to win this one. They're the hot team right now. But we ultimately will just have to wait and see. So there are some quick predictions for tonight's NBA games. But now it's time to move along. We know it's the final day of March, so we're getting closer to the end. And hey, it's March Madness time, and we're getting closer to the Final Four, man. And the fun part about March Madness is it's a one and done tournament. So all it takes is one upset, and that's the end of it right there. I did 2 brackets beforehand. One bracket, I had Florida winning it all. Another bracket, I had Duke. And on Sunday, this bracket with Duke winning the championship officially fell apart. Now, as you see right there, this bracket's completely gone by now. Georgia being the underdog to make it that far, that didn't happen. We had Duke. We did have Duke versus UConn, which did end up happening. And that ended up being a really good game, but had a crazy finish, man. I mean, it was going as expected. Duke was dominating the game. They were in firm control, and it looked like Duke, Illinois, here we go. But then in the second half, the 2 teams basically swapped characteristic play. Wait, what's the word I'm looking for? They basically swapped playing abilities as a teamwork abilities, and all of a sudden, UConn came roaring back, took the lead late, and ultimately stole the win. Now, there was some controversy. People felt there should have been a foul called near the end, but at the end of the day, UConn comes back and wins. Coach Hurley gets the nod of going back to the Final Four with UConn, which further validates the decision not to take that Lakers opening vacancy a few years ago, as he's still at UConn and still winning. An incredible finish. Man. But that's why they call it March Madness. And that's why so many brackets fall apart, because it's one and done. NBA playoff tournament, it's a lot easier. Sure, the underdog can win game 1, but the favorite can still win the series. In March Madness, you lose one time, even as the favorite, it is over. Take the L out of lover, over. But seriously, congratulations to UConn. But now that brings us down to 4. You got Arizona and Michigan. You know, that's the game Mitch is looking most forward to, because that's his team in Michigan. And then you got Illinois and UConn. So we're just going to, for the preview, we're going to take kind of a quick look at some of the key contributors to the teams getting here. We're just going to kind of go with the different teams. Let's start with Arizona. Yet Arizona has had a pretty solid year. You've had Jaden Bradley as their guard, who's been a key contributor. He's the Big 12 Player of the Year. And he's also been a floor general, too, as well. He's been pretty good at assist. You got Braden Burries, who's been the lead scorer of that team. And you also got some other good solid role players like Cog Pete, the Western Most Outstanding Player of the Week. And if I'm pronouncing this right, it's the center. You know who I'm talking about. Motigas Kravis. He's been a solid rebounder, so he contributes for the little aspects. And then you move on. We're going to switch to matchups here and talk a little bit about Illinois. Now, Illinois is an interesting team because they got some European players too on this team. You got Andrej Stojakovic, and yes, Andrej Stojakovic with a J is the son of former Sacramento King Peja Stojakovic. He's been averaging 22 points per game, and he's been a key contributor for Illinois' run this far, as well as Zornomir Obzovic, if I'm pronouncing that correct. And you also got from Montenegro, David Mirkovic. So you've had several Europeans. This is almost like when the Mavs tried to make that run back into the bubble when they were mostly Europeans. You had Doncic, you had Porzingis, and a few other guys. But hey, man, Illinois has been making a pretty good run, though. And plus, with Stojakovic, he learned from his dad, who played in the NBA for 13 seasons, had a couple All-Star nods, and was a role player in a championship win for the Dallas Mavericks. So, Andrej from Illinois, he's had the privilege of having his dad, a former NBA star, mentor him and get him ready for this moment. So, Illinois, they're an interesting team, but I think, too, part of it is a lot of these guys sleep on them because they're mostly European players. They look at these guys and be like, oh, these guys are just a bunch of European players. They're not really going to, they don't really think that that's going to work out well. They don't, and I think that's played a role in Illinois' success. Some people underestimating them because they got a lot of European players on their team. But that's worked out in their favor in terms of those guys playing together. And then now we get back to the Arizona side. We're going to talk a little bit about Arizona's opponent and Mitch's favorite team, the Michigan Wolverines. They've had some star players. You've had Yaxel Lendenborg. He's led the team in scoring about 15 points per game, and he's a key contributor with steals. You've had Adia Mara, center, who's the top rebounder and a good shot blocker. Morris Johnson Jr., a really good rebounder and a scorer too. You got Elliot Kadingu. And you got guys like Brody Gale Jr. These guys have all been contributing players and have put together a really good team there in Michigan. Now going against Arizona, that's going to be a tough matchup between Michigan and Arizona. And that's probably going to be, I'd say, out of the two Final Four matchups, Michigan, Arizona over Duke and Illinois, UConn and Illinois. That's probably, I'm thinking Michigan, Arizona is going to be the more interesting matchup out of the two. Because you got guys you got some really good players. So you got good players on both sides with Arizona and Michigan. Two teams that have consistently been consistent throughout the season and into the tournament. And now these two teams come head-to-head to clash in the Final Four with an opportunity at the championship game on the line. It's going to end up being a really good game, but I'll have Michigan taking the slight nod over Arizona in this one in what should be a good matchup. Now that turns us to the other side, the UConn Huskies, who are back at the stage after a huge comeback win against Duke, led by guys like Taurus Reed Jr., Alex Carbon, Solo Ball, and Braylon Mullins. These guys had a phenomenal performance, but I got to consider UConn the favorites over Illinois because Coach Hurley's been in this situation before. he's won with different players. And throughout this run, showing that he can still win with different crew members. You're talking arguably the best modern college basketball coach and Coach Dan Hurley, who's led this team to national championships before. He's got them back again at the Final Four. I got to say, the experience factor from a coaching standpoint in big game situations in March Madness is the edge I'm going to give UConn in this situation. And we saw they came back against Duke, who were the projected favorites after Florida got bounced. We saw this team never gave up. They continued to believe they had a chance, even when everyone else counted them out and said, yeah, we told you so. We told you Duke had the nod. UConn never gave up, and they ultimately came back and won that game. So I'm taking UConn to win this game against Illinois. But Illinois had a nice run. They found a way to mesh the European players on their team together. But I'd say that big game experience with a coach who knows how to get the best out of his players is going to be the deciding factor, which would mean we'd get a UConn-Michigan finals, which to me, as far as intriguing matchup goes, if UConn takes care of business against Illinois in terms of big market, big game feels, in terms of viewership and ratings, you're going to get that with UConn and if they win pretty much no matter what, whether it be Michigan or Arizona. You got Michigan, Arizona, two teams that have consistently dominated. One of those two teams is going to the championship matchup regardless. Whether it's Arizona or Michigan, someone wins, boom, you're going to the championship round. So I think that's how I feel like, hey, if UConn wins, we're going to get a nice, a key marquee matchup for the final, for the championship round, which, let's face it, we know the media likes it better when the big market teams are in the championship games. Like when it's teams like UConn, Florida, Duke, North Carolina. I'm just saying, hypothetically speaking, or teams like Michigan, when those teams usually make it to the championship round, hypothetically, the media likes it better. They like when those big market college programs make it to the finals. Now, switching sports for a second, and I know this is neither here nor there with this year's Final Four, but when you had USC and Texas in that Rose Bowl, part of the reason it's considered one of the most historic of all time is because you had two big market college football programs clashing against each other in the most important college game of that season. That's why that game's highly remembered, too. Not just because it was a back and forth game and because a huge win streak got snapped, but because it was two marquee college football schools playing each other in the most important game of that season. So we know that, the sports media, they would want UConn versus Michigan probably. That's the matchup they probably want the most. And to be honest, I would love to see that matchup too. That would be fun and intriguing. I know Mitch wants that. Well, Mitch just wants Michigan to win, period, no matter who it is. He just wants his Michigan Wolverines to win. But either way, it should be fun. So we're going to take a look at the schedule. So it's set. We still got a few more days for it. We're going to have later tonight, me and Agent Warrior X will be live for Everything on the Table. It will be Agent's last episode until about mid-April, say. So here's how it's going to go. We're going to have, here's the schedule set. You got, it's going to be two primetime matchups. You're starting Saturday at 6:09 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You got UConn, Illinois as the first matchup. And then you get closer to 9 p.m., you're going to have Arizona and Michigan. So that's the schedule there. And then we'll have the final matchup on Monday where the winners of those two respective matchups play each other. And then we'll be back next week on episode 54 of the 3-Point Blitz to recap it. So, hey, man, we're almost done. We do have one more thing before we go. Well, actually, two more things. First, I need to refill my bottle of water So I'll be right back in just 1 second. So it'll be 1 second. I got to refill my bottle of water. Then we'll have the new 2-minute recap segment, which I debuted last week, and we're doing it again this week. The 2-minute recap segment is just going to be kind of like a quick touching up on some of the stories that have been going on across sports that aren't major stories, but they're still at least worth an acknowledgement. That I'll just clip into like a small 2-minute segment. So I'm going to get a quick sip of water real quick, be back, do the quick 2-minute recap. So stay tuned. We're not done quite yet. Woo! That's right, baby. Yeah, it's always need to stay refill. Yeah, it's been a fun day, but to come outside and do an entire 3-point Blitz episode outdoors for the first time. And we had some fun coming on here talking about the Final Four a little bit, talking about the key players for each team, going over the NBA, paying homage to Joey Browner from the Minnesota Vikings. But now, let's do the quick 2-minute recap. I'm going to wait till I hit 123 to do it. Just going to do a quick breeze through some of the stories that aren't necessarily the most important, but they do deserve acknowledgement. But, we're going to go at 122.30 for the live time. So in a few more seconds, let the 2-minute recap begin. In the women's March Madness, we're down to a Final Four of UConn. UConn, both the men's and women's are having phenomenal games. P.S. There was a reaction to the women's team reacting to UConn men's comeback as the supportive showing their support. But that will be UConn, UCLA, Texas, and South Carolina. As far as the Hardcore Sports Network goes, Coach Ed Gladney, one of my compadres from my time on the Pick and Roll podcast, he's got his She Got Game podcast at 7 on the network, where he'll talk more about the women's game and give more in-depth analysis. But as far as news goes, my Philadelphia Eagles did sign Elijah Moore, who played with A.J. Brown at Ole Miss. And we know there's a great connection between them. There was a story where Elijah helped A.J. in a serious situation at Ole Miss. So it seems to me like their Eagles want to keep A.J. Brown around. They don't want to trade him. So all that talk about A.J. Brown getting traded, it just seems like it's still just a continuing, ongoing rumor just to get people talking. We already saw the Broncos rumors fell through. Now there's the Myles Garrett rumors. Here we go again. Garrett to the Eagles talk, but it don't look like he's going anywhere. They brought in Elijah Moore, who's still a solid receiver, who can be teammates with A.J. Brown, someone that A.J. Brown has respect for that can help out. Obviously, the Eagles don't want to trade A.J. unless he completely falls off or has an Antonio Brown level crash out, which I've not seen that happen yet. I don't see him getting traded. Also, I know a little late, Cam Thomas got waived by the Bucs. This might be the end of Cam Thomas as a potential serious prospect in the NBA. It's possible maybe Cam Thomas might have to go overseas. And sometimes that happens. You've had prospects who weren't that great in the NBA, but made it overseas and had solid careers for themselves. And plus, it looks like this Floyd Money Mayweather Manny Pacquiao rematch, they say that they want to count it as a real fight, not an exhibition, which either way, I personally think that's a joke. That's why boxing ain't that popular in the mainstream anymore. Yeah. So that's it for the 2-minute recap. Just the quick, small stories to at least acknowledge. So that's that there, man. So yeah, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the 3-Point Blitz. So episode 53 is in the books. We will be back for episode 54 next week, where we will recap the Final Four and the championship round from March Madness. So next week we'll have that on the table. Plus, being that it'll be the first episode in April, it'll be the first mock draft I do. Throughout the month of April, I'm going to do some NFL mock drafts. Probably I'm going to do an all Philadelphia Eagles mock draft. Maybe I'll do several run-throughs. I'll probably do a 3-round run-through, then a 5-round run-through, then a full 7-round run-through for next week. So I'll be doing an Philadelphia Eagles mock draft next week. So you want to stay tuned for that. Also, on my channel, we did have a poll that was running for people that came into this 3-Point Blitz on my side, asking who you think's going to win the men's March Madness. So I put the 4 options, obviously being the 4 teams left in the tournament. Let's see how that poll did. So I'm going to officially close that poll in just a second. So we got 4 votes. It was 2 for Arizona, 1 for Michigan, 1 for UConn. And that's the end of the poll. So that's the end of the poll right there. So thanks to the 4 that voted on the poll, gave their opinion. Now we'll see ultimately how this plays out. So we'll see who ends up being the leaders there. So that's it for the 3-Point Blitz. But later tonight, we got everything on the table with Agent Warrior X at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll talk about March Madness. I know Agent's going to have something, like host that show, is going to have something to say about March Madness, particularly the Duke-UConn game. And I'm sure he'll have something to say about baseball as well, too, with him being a Yankees fan, the start of the season. All I'm going to say about baseball real quickly, though, is the Phillies got to move on from Rob Thompson. It ran its course. They got destroyed by the Nationals last night, 13-2. They play them again today, and tomorrow is part of a triple header. I just feel it's ran its course over there with Rob Thompson. He had a nice turnaround when they made it to the World Series his first year he took over, but the ship's kind of falling apart now. It's best they move on from him. But, hey, guys, but me and Agent will definitely talk on everything on the table, more about March Madness, baseball, possible other subjects such as from popular culture, such as movies, TV shows might also be on the table. So stay tuned for that later tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on episode 8. Then episodes 9 and 10 after that, I'll be doing it by myself next Tuesday and the Tuesday after. But that's what's on the table coming up. So yeah, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the 3-Point Blitz. It's been nice to come outside. Thank you, as always, to guys like Arku, Nick, Gregor for stopping by, showing their support. And I'll catch y'all later.
Okay, we got some breaking news from the NFL world today. So, former Indianapolis Colts head coach, former Eagles offensive coordinator Frank Reich has now been hired by the Carolina Panthers.
Somewhere along those lines.
I like those glasses. I like those glasses, dude. They're nice.
Tonight's gonna be a thriller!
Have I told you I worked at the World Series? It was my first year at the stadium. I went to Fanatics Fest, I went to Comic-Con, and I went to the World Series. It was my first year at the stadium, and the Yankees made it all the way to the World Series. Unfortunately, we lost 5 games to the Dodgers.
I said the Giants will be a perfect fit for John Harbaugh because you already established the quarterback situation. You already established the running back position. You already established the wide receiver position, and you have the top 5 pick in the draft.
Todd Bowles, at best, is a mediocre coach. He did the same situation with the Jets back in 2015, ultimately maliciously ruining a power-hungry Baker Mayfield and potentially Mike Evans.
But Indianapolis ultimately came back, got the go-ahead touchdown. Then at the end of the game, when Brady got the ball less than a minute, Peyton had his head down the entire time because he knew Brady had enough time. But the interception happened. It's funny. All of a sudden, Peyton Manning hears the crowd roaring. He finally looks up and starts jumping up and down real